I have pretty extreme adult ADHD. And so I've been navigating learning that and what that looks like in business. I don't care if a customer is going to spend $5 or $5 million. They, to me, should be treated with equal value. A measure of success 5 years down the road is having the ability to be able to be comfortable in my life financially and not be a slave to the desk. I had been operating under a level of stress and burnout that I wasn't realizing, and I didn't realize how much it was affecting other areas of my life until I took the opportunity to step away.
Hey, just before we jump into the show, got a little favor to ask you. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, please make sure you are subscribed on the platform of your choice. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever platform that might be. The more people who subscribe and the more people who like and rate the show, the more we give you an opportunity to have some great takeaways. It doesn't take you too long, and it would be a great help to us to help us grow the show. For now, that's it. Enjoy today's recording. Good afternoon, Brad. Thank you for joining us from the other side of the world. It's great to see you today and spending some time with us. Do you want to give a bit of background to who you are, those who don't know you, and what gets you here today?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Ben. I really appreciate the opportunity. My name is Brad Nelms, and I am the founder and principal of TechX, which is a consulting business in the entertainment industry. So I have been in the entertainment industry for my entire career, over 20 years, and been on kind of all sides of that, and worked for rental and production companies and distributors and manufacturers, been an end user in venues and things, and spent about a decade in the used gear space, moving used equipment all over the world. And I recently went out on my own about a year ago and started this consulting company. So I'm now offering 3 pillars of service specific to entertainment. The first is general business consulting, which is, sales, management, operations, fractional and consulting services, tech stack stuff. And the second is brokering of equipment, people, and resources. And then the third pillar is helping people fill holes in projects and production. But so far, it's been a really amazing year and quite a journey to start my own thing, which is something that I've always wanted to do. And fortunately, knock on wood, it's been about everything I pictured and then some.
And what caused you to sort of go, right, do you know what, now's the time to go and do myself? And how's that journey been?
It's a good question. I have always had an entrepreneurial spirit, always wanted to own my own business and do my own thing, whether in the entertainment industry or not. And I'm very passionate about small business across the board, whether you're selling teddy bears or whatever it is, doesn't matter. I just think business is fascinating and solving business problems is fascinating. I left my employer at the end of 24 for a multitude of reasons, but what I ended up doing was after I left, I took a few months to intentionally do nothing. And I'm fortunate that my wife also works and, she has a decent salary. So we were able to do that financially. And I really took some time to reset and assess. And I discovered from that just how burnt out I had been since COVID really was the beginning of that process for me. But, I'm 20 years into an 80, 60 hour a week career with travel and, all the things that come with relatively high level positions in any industry. So I was pretty burnt from that and didn't know until I stopped. My wife and I moved up to Northern California about 3.5 years ago, and we're lucky enough to be able to get some property. If you've never owned acreage, it is a full-time job to maintain it. And we also have young children. We have a now 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. So we have a lot going on in our lives. And one of the things that we found, because of all of the things that were obligations, requirements, whatever you want to call them, we didn't have time to do a lot of the things that we enjoy doing. We like traveling and camping and exploring things and, just doing family stuff or whatever. And that part was missing out in our life. So, one of the things that I had as an idea going into this was, first, it was kind of a side hustle to generate some cash flow to be able to continue to figure out what I wanted to do. And then as that became very successful without a lot of effort, I decided to really lean into that and hone it to make it something that I can do. And I'm very fortunate that because of the contacts that I have in the industry and the reputation that I've built, that I was able to work not very hard, honestly, through 2025 and do very well, especially for a first year. But in general, I didn't have marketing, was operating pretty covertly, and I really leaned into that and decided that what I want this company to be and what I want as a vision for my life and my family's life is a way that we can make good money and capitalize on the experience and contacts that I have, and be able to still have a life outside of that. So I'm really leaning into building a business that involves myself and a handful of other people that are all more or less working kind of part time, and being able to do that completely flexible. Nobody's punching a clock. Nobody. I don't care if people work 0 days a month or 100 hours a week or whatever it is, as much as they want to or don't want to. And if we can put together 4 or 5 part-time guys that are good and be the equivalent of 2 or 3 full-time people, then all of us can do other things with our lives, whether that's have another job and this is a side gig, or go travel, or do whatever else. So I've been able to put together a team of people that have a similar kind of passion for small business and knowledge in the industry that can be effective at a small amount of time, and really lean into that. It's early, so we'll see if that continues, but that's where I'm driving things currently, and where I'm really passionate about pushing it. And I've been fortunate that so far, at least, it has been successful with that vision.
And you've worked for big companies, and you've worked for yourself. What's been that journey like? You have a HR department, you have a finance department, you have all that. And what's that journey you've been through to get to where you are now, where you are the HR department, you are the finance department?
Yeah,
Right?
it's interesting. When I first decided that I was going to become a consultant, part of it was because of that I have a fair amount of experience in just about every aspect of business. Whether it's accounting and finance or HR stuff, legal stuff, obviously sales, management, operations, any of that I've done or had my hands in some form or another. Um, I think the part that you don't realize is doing that in an existing controlled environment with systems and processes is one thing, but having to create that yourself is a totally different animal. So, like, one of the biggest challenges that I've run up against just recently has been, I started taking credit cards for my business, but because of the nature of what I do and how I do it, that it's high ticket transactions that involve a lot of logistics and inventory that I don't own and whatever else, that my credit card processor kicked me off. They decided that I was too high of a risk profile for them, and they didn't like it because they like cookie cutter retail stuff that's $50 and you take your widget and leave. Well, they kicked me off in the middle of $90,000 worth of orders, and they refunded those orders. And then I had to go and find another credit card processor and figure that out. And so, like, navigating those kinds of things has definitely been a learning curve for me. And I brought on a CPA that I was not sure that I needed, but after the fact, definitely learned that I absolutely needed a CPA to be able to make sure that all of my ducks were in a row legally and paperwork wise, and dealing with tax stuff and all that. Because of course, those are the things that you learn, that once you step in it, that's when it's painful. But it also is just a big time suck, especially with a learning curve, right? You can spend all of your time and energy trying to figure out filing taxes and doing that the right way, and making sure you're maximizing your benefits on it. Or you can spend that same amount of time, selling stuff or helping customers or whatever, and leaning into that. So really embracing the idea of paying other experts where it makes sense has been, I think, the biggest unexpected thing for me, in that would be different than I would have anticipated coming from larger organizations.
As you said, those things you don't expect to be a problem, like the credit card thing, right? You don't expect that to be a problem, so you go, "Oh, I'll do that," and then they don't teach you that at business. It's my favorite phrase on this podcast is, they don't teach you that at business school, but they really don't teach you that at business school, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was not something in a million years that I ever thought of would even be a problem. I thought it was just like, well, I've got orders, I've got good customers that I know, and here, take the money and go with it. But they didn't like it, so that was a whole thing.
And what's been the biggest challenge since you setting up on your own? Was it that credit card payment?
I think that's been the biggest logistical challenge, just like hurdle that I had to jump through from an infrastructure standpoint. I would say bigger picture, the biggest challenge for me has been figuring out how to balance not spending 40, 60, 80 hours a week working and still be effective in a way that moves the company forward every single day, right? Like little bits that are implemented. So that's something that, again, I'm fortunate to be able to spend a small amount of time and be able to bear fruit from that. But finding that balance in my life and figuring out how to do that so that I'm not dropping balls on the business and moving that forward, and also being able to spend time in other areas of my life. And through that journey, I've also discovered that I have pretty extreme adult ADHD. And so I've been navigating, learning that and what that looks like in business and things, and the challenges that come with that too. So
So is that something you were conscious of before you went to solo, or was it just something you just went, oh, I wonder, and then you found it because in this environment?
my wife has been telling me that I have that for our entire relationship, but I didn't want to believe her. And through multiple things, I have sort of embraced that and finally, went to see an expert about it and learned that it was pretty extreme. And I have since gotten on Adderall, which was a weird experience because it, doesn't, for anybody that has taken that and actually has ADHD or other ADHD medication, it you don't feel like it's doing anything. It's sort of like, if you have ADHD, a weird thing in your brain, and I don't understand the chemistry behind this, but a weird thing in your brain happens that you don't respond physically to stimulants. So like ADHD people don't, like, they wouldn't do anything with cocaine or speed or whatever, right? Like that wouldn't really affect them. Within reason, of course. I'm sure there are limits, but so I took it for a couple weeks and didn't really feel anything. But then after several months of being on it and getting the dosage correct and all of that, I don't necessarily notice the difference of when I'm on it, but when I am not taking it, I feel like a crazy person. And I don't know if that's because my tolerance for organization and things has gone down, having that as almost a crutch, or if it's really more an eye opener of just not realizing how scattered my life was. So being able to hone in on that, I think it's been an important part of this journey in my company to learn that. And I think that has also been a good catalyst for me to be able to really accept that as a part of my body and my life. That, I can't lean on other people at this point anymore, right? It's just me, and anybody that's working with me is dependent on what I, open up for them to be able to do. So I can't hide it, basically.
No, and I suppose when you're in that big organization, you've got a lot of things around you. Where I work, I have a team of people who will do bits and pieces, and that helps you focus those things. You're more focused. But if you're just you need your focus on you, and that's a
Yeah.
different set of skills, right?
I've described it, as I've discovered more about it, is it feels like when I'm not on the medication, or just in general, it kind of feels like I'm standing in one of those money machines with a fan where you're like grabbing cash. And those are all of the thoughts that I have at any given time. So it's just whichever one happens to end up in my hand is what pops into my head or out of my mouth. But now that I've been able to understand it and get on the meds for it, and build some systems and processes around it, I have a little bit more control and prediction around that.
The entertainment industry was horrifically hit during COVID. No bands, no gigs, no shows, no events. I've talked to a number of people on the pod, and they've all come up with different answers. But what are we seeing the challenges for you coming out of COVID? We're now 5 years since we were put into lockdown. What are you seeing the challenges in the industry now that have happened since that period of time?
That's an interesting question. There are some specific things to the industry, obviously, that I could get into, but just speaking more generically, I think um, the first one that I would say is it definitely took 3, 4, 5 years. Like, we're really at I would say this next upcoming summer season is going to be the first year that it feels to me like things have kind of normalized since COVID. Even last year a little bit, and certainly in 24, 23, 22, there was a lot of reaction to trying to make up time from COVID, or like just shove as many events as people possibly could into every available window, because we missed 2.5 years, right? There was nothing that happened in that time. So there was a lot of sort of craziness that happened around that and trying to get back to normal. I think we have we're sort of reaching that point to whatever the new normal will be, but it feels a little bit more of a typical cadence in terms of seasonality. And um, the entertainment industry always runs last minute, unfortunately, but it feels like that's getting a little bit less, at least from things that I see. What I learned the most, I think, coming out of COVID that applied to things was how much it affected supply and demand, which seems like an obvious statement at a high level. But on my side of things, for the last decade or so, I've spent a lot of time in the used equipment business, which was helping rental companies, distributors, manufacturers, whoever sell used or B stock equipment to other rental companies or end users or whomever. So B2B brokering of gear for people. And, um, you know, there was a lot of thought that people had that during COVID that it must have been super easy because everybody wanted to sell their gear. So there was all this gear available to sell. Well, there weren't any buyers because nobody was doing anything. So the only people that were available to buy stuff were people that happened to be sitting on cash because they were well positioned financially when they went into COVID, just out of luck or planning or whatever. And then, as we came out of COVID and it was this frenzy of shows, it was the opposite problem that there were all of these buyers, but manufacturers were delayed in delivering because of supply issues, and prices had gone way out of whack. So everything got really expensive, and so then there was an opposite problem that there was all this demand and no supply. So I think the biggest thing that I learned out of that is that the power of supply and demand, I'll say, which applied to every industry and every aspect of the world, on consumer goods and things, but on even on the business side and on things that existed, didn't have to be manufactured. It still had such a huge play, and really made it a difficult time in that space for several years.
I was on the manufacturer, or still am in the manufacturing side, and I remember the challenges about shipping components somewhere else in the world, and what shipping costs have gone through the roof, and all. Oh, I'm seeing that at the moment as well. But the shipping costs of everything is a challenge, right? It was just unmanageable at times.
But that's a good point. We used to do I used to do a lot of stuff where we would bring over gear like from Asia into the U.S. or whatever by the container kind of thing, and a container pre-COVID was $2,500 to get from China or whatever to the U.S. And then during COVID, it suddenly became 10 or 15 grand, and there was no guarantee of timeline or whatever. So it's like, how do you function in that kind of an environment where everything is not just more expensive, but exponentially more expensive, and has no guarantees of anything. And it's just like living in a world of fluff, right? I can't promise you anything. Spend all the money. I don't know what I'll give you when, but hopefully it happens.
There was a discussion internally at one point about whether it was cheaper to put somebody on a plane and bring back some hand luggage with components than it was to get it shipped properly. It was a crazy thing to say that at the time. You've been going a year now. Is there a point you sort of laid in bed at night and gone, yeah, it's working, this was a good decision to do? Or have you not quite reached that point? Or are you sort of dreaming of that point? Or where do you think you're at with it?
Some of both. I was very fortunate that 25 was a really good year for me. Transparently, in 25 with zero marketing and operating pretty covertly, I did like $1 million in revenue. Unfortunately, the downside was that fell off a cliff mid-October and didn't pick up until like a month ago. So things were very good in 25 and looked like it was going to, continue up and up and up. And then there were 4 months around the holidays, which holidays are typically slower, but not zero. So I did basically zero in revenue for about 3.5, 4 months. And that was a challenge. And it seems to be kicking back up, and things seem to be turning loose. And the closer we get to summer for our industry, the easier that gets. But there's a lot of challenges right now with our administration and the economy and tariffs and just all of those variables. And mostly, again, like COVID, it's not even so much the direct impacts of them, it's the unknown of what might change tomorrow that are causing people to hold their purse really tight and just only make absolutely critical decisions, which people aren't spending money. It's hard to sell them stuff.
And how did you find that sort of challenge from a the revenue patterns changing so abruptly? Was that something you forecasted as a business owner? You try and put a forecast, a plan.
It is not something that I forecasted. I mean, I forecasted that there would be a dip, but not that drastic of a dip for that long of a period. And in fact, my wife and I have had several discussions of, being on this side of it now. That's the patterns of those things in the industry have always been a thing for me, and I've always known about them. But we, as like a family, have always been insulated from them because I've been a W-2 employee with a salary, right? So those ups and downs have happened, and that pressure's been on me to deliver for a company, but it's never been on us financially to like pay our bills. So being on the other side of that has been a wake-up call, certainly, and a challenge, and something that we've agreed and figured out that we have to assume that there's going to be more of that than I was expecting, and we need to do a better job this year and in the future to plan ahead and really stash some of that capital rather than just use it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And so have you sort of identified what that challenge has been, what the reason, or was it just as you said, the unknowns, the economy, the tariffs and everything like that, and is that what you think it's triggered it?
I mean, the holidays are certainly a factor, but typically the holidays are only a factor from like mid-November to like January 10, right? That kind of range is typically when you see, and it also usually isn't zero historically, in my experience at least, right? Like nothing really happens around Thanksgiving in the US. And then as you get to like Christmas and New Year's, the spending that people do is about usually use it or lose it money, right? So they have budgets that they want to do before the end of the year, and so they're trying to get some things in the door so they don't lose that cash, or they have to come up with they have to do a tax offset or whatever it is, right? So like there's some end of year drivers that typically do something, and sometimes you get lucky and those are big somethings, and oftentimes they're meh somethings, but it's better than zero. But certainly for the period that it was, I think that it had a lot more to do with the state of the world and the economy and things. Because that was, I don't remember the exact dates, but I believe the first like crazy tariff announcement went out in August or September or something, and then there were changes, and so it I think was a trickle down effect of things that had been put into motion, but hadn't actually happened until about 6-8 weeks before that. And so then it was just seeing the trickle down effect of that coming to fruition. Where, I mean, like in the consumer world, there were a lot of things that were affected by tariffs when they first were implemented, but there was still inventory stateside that insulated companies from that. So you didn't see the effects of the prices or the lack of inventory until 2-3 months later when they ran out and had to order again. So I think it was that sort of delay that I would attribute that to. And from people that I talked to, the vast majority of them at least had similar things. I know manufacturers were struggling during that period, and many still are. And I think shows were kind of hanging in the balance a little bit, just not knowing what was happening. So fortunately, I guess I'll say it wasn't me. But the bad news of that is that means that there's not much that I can do to fix that. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the sort of delayed. We're recording this just a little while into the Middle East crisis thing that's going on, and when the first thing happened on the Saturday morning, I sort of thought, right, everything's going to drop. Monday morning shares are going to drop. Petrol prices will go up. It's going to be chaos. And for about 10 days, it was nothing. There was nothing. I was like, oh, this is a bit odd. And then it was like about 10 days in that petrol prices, I've now got 20p, 20 cent, whatever you want to call it, on top of my petrol price. And the shares have plummeted. It was almost like that delayed reaction while everyone goes, oh, we've got some reserves. We'll get, oh, now we're in trouble sort of type thing to fix it out, right?
Well, and I think some of that too is about just like, will it continue or not, right? That's one of the biggest challenges with what's going on in the world right now is just you never know what's going to happen when he wakes up and decides to do something different.
We look at technology, right? I've done numerous recordings of this pod, and I've not yet got through a pod without talking about AI. But what's your take on where technology is going? What are you using with technology for your world? How are you seeing that impacting what you're trying to do?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, by nature of what I'm trying to do to build a successful company that involves as minimal input as possible, I am leaning into AI where it makes sense. Um, I am not a software developer by any stretch of the word. I am very technically savvy and can, do some of that stuff, but I'm not a developer by any sense. So I have implemented AI in some places where it existed in like tools that I was already using or wanted to use. I did use AI to build about 80% of my website, and then I brought in a developer to clean it up and finish it and get it over kind of the finish line. And I do intend to implement it more on more the data side of things. That's where I see the biggest value, especially for small businesses, is being able to parse through large sets of data and standardize things, and really be able to lean into a data analyst type team without having to have that team. Um, and there are a lot of places in my world where that applies specifically, that mostly has to do with like market analysis kind of stuff and tracking prices and those types of things. But um, I think as a general statement, AI is a great tool. Um, there are a lot of scary foreshadowing things that you can come up with about what it might do in the future that may or may not come to fruition. But I think today, if you're not using it, you're gonna be behind if you're not already. At least learning it enough to be comfortable with it. Doesn't mean that you have to use it in every single day aspects, but if you're not at least comfortable with what it can and can't do, and understand how to use it effectively and where to use it, I think it's going to be a similar effect to the internet and Google, right? Of people that didn't immediately jump into that, and we're still using phone books and hard maps and encyclopedias and things. Like, does it work? Sure, it's worked for generations, but now that you have these other tools, everybody that's not doing that anymore is going to be so much further ahead. So I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't at least learn it and use it enough to understand it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in it to be able to multiply your bandwidth and your own capabilities. Obviously, there are, a million and one AI companies that are doing lots of things. Some of them are useful. Some of them, I think, are just people trying to capitalize on the financial opportunity. That are like, hey, we made an agent that can do this other thing that will last for about 10 minutes and then it'll go away. So I think there's some greed around the AI world. There's a lot of opportunity for people that have the real technical skills that want to get into it and can do it in the right way. But I don't think it's going anywhere. And I think, I think everybody should be using it in some form or another, so that they don't miss the boat and be completely out of touch with the world.
It's a useful tool in the right hands, in the right way. A mate of mine this morning might message me and I won't say what he put in because it's about world environment, but he said, put this into AI and see what it comes up with as the prognosis. And he said, you won't want to get out of bed this morning because it's horrific. And I was like, oh, great, thanks. Thanks so much, Ben, for that comment. So yeah, it's the tool in the right place, but it's useful as well. You can't get away with it, and it'll be a useful thing to have.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely a tool in the toolbox, but you have to understand its limitations and where it's helpful. And I think the people that are going to step on themselves are the ones that let AI completely run on its own. If you put it in the middle of human things and you have an interstep to be able to verify information and make sure that it's doing what you need and not just like letting it run wild. Like I get ads all the time for Fixer. There's like an email inbox thing that is an AI inbox. Like, the idea of that sounds amazing because I'm the person that perpetually has 2,000 unread emails. But the practicality of what that means with where AI is today sounds horrifying. And like, I'm just going to create this giant mess of things that will be impossible to undo. So yeah, I'm not going to do those kinds of things, at least not at this stage. Maybe in the future when it's a little bit more reliable, or you can really hone it more to be you and not just a box.
You have gone through being employed in a big company and smaller companies and medium-sized companies, and then going to run yourself. How have you found yourself changing in business for that? Because you must have adapted how you approach customers, how you deal with things. Are you much more, not saying you weren't personal when you were in big business, but it's your own name now above the door rather than company X or company Y. How has that changed you?
It's interesting. I would say for me, how I interact with customers, the way that I engage with customers, and I'll say like my goals and my ethics as I go into a deal or an opportunity on things, that has been the most consistent throughout my entire career. And I honestly think that that's what has gotten me to where I am. I like to joke that in the lighting industry, there are about 100 people that really run the business. And every once in a while, everybody throws their card in a hat and picks out a new one. And what you see is when that shuffle happens, that with some exception, but largely people buy from people, right? Like the same customers go to the same guy, whether they're at manufacturer A or B or, whatever, because they build that trust, they build that relationship. They, can call them on their cell phone at 9 o'clock at night on a weekend and they'll get a response or, whatever, which not to say that you have to build your life around being attached to a digital leash, but the responsiveness, the trustworthiness, most importantly, the follow through and, being able to deliver on things that you say that you will, those are what are the most important. And I have always very much had the attitude of, I don't care if a customer is going to spend $5 or $5 million. They, to me, should be treated with equal value. And oftentimes they take the same amount of time, right? For better or worse. But what tends to happen is at least a handful of those $5 customers, if you treat them the same as the $5 million customer, when they have, 100 grand to go do something, they'll bring it to you instead of somebody else.
I think that's a great lesson. Treat everyone the same, right? You'll succeed. Yeah. You'll get them. Yeah, I started out hiring 4 lights, and that same company supported me when I went and did a show in the West End, and
yeah,
stuff
exactly.
Like that, right? So because they stick with you and you work through them, and I think that's a really good lesson for people.
Yeah, early on in my career, I was in integration, still in the industry, but I was more in the field, installation, project management stuff for lighting and rigging systems, and I did a lot of churches and schools that typically they have low budgets, with some exception, but typically they have low budgets, and it's all onesie twosie stuff like doing service calls to clean a dimmer rack or something like that. That's $200, right? Like it's nothing in the grand scheme, but you go do that and you do it well and you treat them with respect and you pass knowledge to them and train them on their system and show them that you have the knowledge and also enable them to take care of themselves. Then when they get the money to do a major renovation, they're going to call you because they know that they had a good experience with you. So I've seen that in action so many times.
You talked about a little bit earlier about sort of the things that you can't control. Is that what keeps Brad up at night? Is the, hey, listen, I've done the best I can do, but I can't control what's happening in the world.
My dad, he has always had he's a big participant in the AA world. And, one of the mantras there is about knowing what you can and can't control and being able to let go of the things that you can't. And really for me, it's about focusing on inputs, not outputs, right? Making sure that I'm showing up when I need to and doing everything that I can do within my control to yield the results that I need or want, and understanding that regardless of what that is, there are times when that just doesn't happen. And oftentimes there's, no matter how many different ways I could have done it, oftentimes there's nothing that I could do that would change that result. And that's been something too, I think, is in sales, that is a really hard lesson to learn early on, of like, you throw a lot of darts at the wall and many of them don't stick. And that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and you've got to pick yourself up to throw more darts the next day and keep going on that sales path.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And what do you think, with your training that you've had over those 20 years or in those businesses, have you taken away from those companies and taken into what you're doing now? Is it certain processes? Is it sales techniques? Is it a mixture of things and not one identifiable?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I have pulled out of that, or one of the biggest, I should say, that I both am trying to put into practice for myself and also is something that I preach to clients on the consulting side, is within reason, set up your infrastructure assuming that the growth is happening. The biggest things that I've seen companies spend unnecessary money and fall over themselves is, the classic, you go lease a building on a 10-year lease and then in year 2 it's too small, or you get into a CRM because it was cheap. And then the next year, you have to go and do this whole build out, and then you have to like start the entire process over and retrain your entire staff. And like, it just, the disruption that comes from those kinds of things of having to redo infrastructure pieces of your business is massive. And especially as a small company where it's, only a couple people doing everything, that's a lot of time wasted. And setting up your processes early means that you're training yourself and your team to do things the right way, assuming that you're, going to scale. Now, that's not to say that there aren't differences in how you should set up a 10-person company versus a 10,000 person company. There absolutely are. And understanding what the potential is reasonable, right? Like a 10-person company shouldn't go get on an enterprise level software suite, but a 10-person company should absolutely be using a CRM and an email infrastructure system and a messaging system and storage, which is often where people fail the most, like not Excel sheets on your desktop, right? Google Drive, or some sort of real like storage solution that is accessible and shareable. Getting those things in place and templates and processes as early as possible, so that as you grow, you're growing into that and you're not trying to work backwards to implement it.
What would your advice be to those companies? Do you go and find the most expensive thing you can afford and go, within reason, as you said, not the full, Microsoft Office 1,000 license thing, but do you go and find the best CRM that your budget goes to, or do you go and find the thing you think will work, you might scale? Where would you go with that?
I think it depends on what it is. Talking CRM specifically, like for me, I use HubSpot. I am a more or less one-person company, and I use HubSpot, which is way overkill. They have different tiers in their licenses, so you can step up with HubSpot to be able to grow with them and add more features as you go, which is what I've opted to do. So I think there are solutions of that nature that allow you to grow within a system and have the system expand rather than have to replace the system. Certainly, diving into the most expensive thing from day one doesn't make any cash flow sense, right? You're gonna always be behind just trying to cover software costs in order to be able to function. But there's a middle ground to that too, right? Like if you're always using the free thing or the absolute cheapest option that's out there because it's free or the cheapest option out there, you're going to waste a lot of time redoing things that you don't realize. And my credit card thing is an exact example of that. That came from, I use Wave apps as my accounting software instead of like QuickBooks or whatever. And I did that because I was using it in a separate business that I have in the real estate world that is pretty simple in-out stuff, and it's easy to use. I know enough about accounting to be dangerous, but I'm not an accounting expert by any means. And I was trying not to waste a lot of time with something like QuickBooks that is super powerful, that can do all these different things. It's also affordable. But, things that I've learned about it that I've still come to decide whether or not it's a problem is like it can't tie costs and revenue together. Like you can't have a PO and a PO from a customer and a PO to a vendor. You can't put those together and have that say, okay, this sale went at this margin. You have to do that, yourself, kind of thing. And the credit card processing that I was using was built into Wave, so it sounds like a cool thing that you can turn on Wave payments and you send an invoice and it's got a link in it and away they go and it just happens. And it was a pretty good rate, so it was reasonable. But Wave, Square, some Stripe stuff, right? Like a lot of the simple retail credit card things that are easy and cheap, they have massive limitations, which for some businesses is fine. If you're selling stuff, widgets on Etsy or have a little shop or whatever, that makes total sense. But if you're doing high ticket items or you're doing things that are out of the norm, they don't like that. And there's not even anybody to talk to. I think that was like one of the most frustrating parts about that process is I got an email from them saying, hey, you're gone, bye. And they like kicked me out. There was no discussion, no one that I could call to ask anything. It was just like, good luck. Let us know how you want to refund these, or if you just want to wait for a chargeback. It's like, okay, well, now I'm stuck. So I think those things are examples of where going with the easy or cheap solution, it can be a gotcha. Understandable how people get into those situations and why those decisions are made. But wherever possible, going with the most robust and most scalable option that you have for where you see your business going, I think is the best move where you can afford it.
And so you've gone through this whole thing of starting your new business. What would you give advice to somebody today listens to this podcast and going to go and start their own business? What did you not waste time on, because nothing is a waste of time, right? But what have you gone and done? Gone, do you know what? If I was starting this all again, there's no way I'd do that again.
Oof. I mean, there are a lot of things that I've learned, certainly, and perhaps I'm not even far enough into it to have a great answer to that question. I would say some of the things that I have done that I probably wouldn't do again if I were to start over would be early on. I wasn't sure. I wasn't really committed early on. I was kind of feeling it out and doing it as a side thing. So the first thing that I did, I'm in California, and setting up an LLC in California costs like $800 a year. Most states it's either zero or like $25. So, everything's more expensive in California. And not knowing exactly what I was going to do with it or how far I was going to take it or if it was going to be a permanent thing, I opted initially to just use an existing LLC that I had. So we did that, and then I ended up setting up a DBA under that to be able to operate it as a separate name, and was kind of just trying to do it easy, simple, whatever, which sounds good. But then, 3 months later, I was filing for an LLC and had to change bank accounts, and then I had to get a CPA and all these things. So I think one of the scariest parts about starting a business is figuring out how you're going to afford it in your life, because there's a good chance that you won't be able to take a paycheck or a salary for some period of time while you get it up and running, or ever, or whatever. So figuring that out is a huge barrier, and part of what took me so long to get there. But once you do, I think you really got to go all in and understand that if this is something you're going to do, let's assume that it's going to happen successfully. And rather than always having one foot out the door with a path, really jump in, do it the right way, make sure that your paperwork is in order, make sure that all your legal stuff and your financial stuff and taxes and all those things are all squared away as early as you can. Again, same reason as software stuff. You don't want to have to undo all of that and redo it later. It costs more money. It takes more time. It's a distraction. If you just start the right way, it's an investment, which not everybody's in the position to be able to do, but it saves a lot of headache.
So, you talk about moving to Northern California. I know California as a Brit quite well. How do you feel the quality of life from now being self-employed? Do you feel more stressed by things? Let's talk about staying up at night, but do you feel more stressed by it, the business, or not?
Some of both. And I think that is unique to me and how I've been able to position myself in what I am trying to achieve with this, because I am not trying to make it an 80-hour-a-week job. Like most entrepreneurs don't have that focus, and that is not a luxury that they want to or can afford. So having a business is certainly not a way to be less stressed in 99% of cases. It is, very much a risk reward, and the rewards can be very high, but the risks are generally speaking equally in the other direction. So you have to be able to stomach that. And with that comes stress. And I think the biggest thing that is critical to help through that is having a good support system, whether that's people, a financial backstop, whatever it is, but just to provide your brain and your body and your bank account some level of prop up, I guess I'll say, and encouragement. Simply, really, there is knowing that it's going to have bumps and it's going to have challenges, and they're going to be things that you learn, but having people behind you and being able to make decisions that make sense for your business, not just because they're the decision that has to be made financially because that's the only option, right? Like it's the only thing you can afford or you can't afford or whatever. That's, I think, the thing that it really drives between people that can be successful and people that are always going to struggle. And there's nothing wrong with bootstrapping by any means. Like it's a respectable way to start a business. And if you can operate a business without any debt, amazing. That certainly takes a lot of stress off, but being in a financial position to be able to do it, I think, is a big key to allowing you to be successful and not having it become a major stress point in your life.
And if you think back to sort of Brad of 10 years ago, 20 years ago, somewhere between that window, right? What would Brad of 10 years ago, or what would you be telling Brad of 10 years ago to not make the same mistakes?
No, no, it's funny. I think an example of this, and I'll answer based on where I'm at now, but an example of this that I've thought about a lot in my life is when I first graduated from college. I got a degree, a bachelor's degree in theater, and I knew when I was in school I didn't want to go do shows, I didn't want to go do production. I wanted to own a business. So my plan when I was leaving college was I was going to, in the town that I went to school, which was a college town, and then about an hour away from another major state school, and like pretty well situated geographically between multiple schools and things and theater programs and stuff. I was going to go start uh, essentially a retail shop doing system service and like selling gels and gobos and consumable goods right to the theaters in the area. And I was hell bent that because I was really good at the technical stuff and doing shows and things, that was something that I was going to be able to be successful at. Well, fast forward after I went down and that road and did that at larger companies and things. Definitely the what you don't know, you don't even know what you don't know. I think is how painful that path would have been, because boy, it takes a lot of gel to be able to make any money at $7 a sheet to be able to sustain a business. So I think those kinds of things are definitely real. They're very much real. And there's nothing wrong with being confident and nothing wrong with being willing to take a leap of faith. But also understanding that in any position in your life, doesn't matter if you're starting out or if you're at retirement, there are things that you don't know and there are people that know more than you do. And so being willing and open to learning those things and learning from other people and doing things maybe in a way that you hadn't expected or didn't want to is not a bad thing.
And have you got any sort of bits of life experience you've been given that you'd sort of, you've gone, oh, okay, that bit of advice really helped me at any point in this research journey? Was there not one thing you can cling on to?
I think for me, I go back to how you treat customers, which also equates to other people that you work with too. It really just it comes down to just trying to be the best person that you can be, right? Nobody likes the sneaky used car salesman that is trying to sell you something because they want to make a buck, right? Like nobody enjoys that experience. They can be successful and they can make a lot of money sometimes if they're really good at it, but it's just kind of icky all around, right? No one enjoys that. People like working with, both as a coworker, an employer, employee, and also as a customer and vendor relationship. People like working with people that they feel like they can trust and that have some humanity and that have some ethics. So I've always been a proponent of not selling things based on what I want, selling things to be a solution to a need, right? So in my world, the biggest application of that, I used to do system sales. So I would walk into a church that was looking to do a renovation or whatever venue to do a renovation, and you could sell them 100 moving lights and all the things in the world for a huge price tag. But if that wasn't something that they needed, then number one, they're probably not going to buy it, but number two, if they did, they're always going to feel like they wasted their money. So really honing into what the problem is that the customer is trying to solve, or even in a co-working relationship, what is the problem that's trying to be solved, and solution that. Don't bring your solution to the table before you even know what the problem is.
It's all about listening though as well, isn't it? And somebody I was talking to, somebody in this interview the other day was talking about how they have to go into a high pressure environment and listen to what they're being told without probably knowing all the facts in a very stressful environment. And one of the things for sales is to listen to your customer. Don't sell them what you don't want to sell them, and listen to what they want. It's simple, but not enough people do it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I love about this industry is, generally speaking, you're not creating a need, you're solving an existing problem, which I think the most successful sales organizations do that in any industry. But it's not like the consumer world where you have to put something at the end of an aisle and it be an impulse buy because they saw it, right? You're solutioning an existing issue. So it just makes the sales process much more friendly and respectable and more supportive, rather than feeling like you're having to sell things.
What does success look like for you and what you're doing at the moment in 5 years' time? Is it another 20 contracts? Is it success of retiring on a desert island somewhere? Is it, do you know, what are you aiming for? Or is it just seeing where the journey goes? As you said, you're a year in, right? It's a new venture.
Yeah, it is. I think, for me, a measure of success 5 years down the road, or even 1 year out, 10 years out, is having the ability to be able to um, be comfortable in my life financially and not be a slave to the desk. Right. That's really my goal in whatever that looks like. And in what I'm trying to build with this company is enable that for other people as well. Is get out of that, huge grind all the time and be able to go focus on your family or other things, or even other businesses or whatever. Right. I do real estate stuff on the side, and it's long wish to be able to grow that portfolio. So time and cash is of course a barrier to those things. So just enabling people to do more with their life than go to work every day, even if it's your own business, and do nothing but that for 10, 12 hours of your day every day. I have certainly shifted my priorities, because that was not my thinking even, before I started this journey. But a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was very much the mantra of don't work to live for your work, right? That was kind of how I used to function. But I think having kids has certainly changed that perspective, and discovering how burnt out I was from that process. I've shifted my priorities quite a bit, and am excited to venture into the path to be able to do more with my time other than just work.
Do you think that stepping away, if you hadn't stepped away, do you think you'd have realized you were burnt out? Or did you need that?
No.
Or did you need that break? You weren't.
You
never felt it.
Yeah. I mean, eventually I might have had a breakdown or something, and it might have forced itself. But
Yeah,
no, I mean, I had been operating under a level of stress and burnout that I wasn't realizing, and I didn't realize how much it was affecting other areas of my life until I took the opportunity to step away and do that. And I mean, I would say that there are people that thrive on that grind, and like that's what they need. I think a lot of those people are masking for other holes in their lives that maybe if they had more time, they might fill them. But that's not for me to say. That's for their therapist to say.
The podcast is called the Business Takeaway Podcast, right? If somebody's listened to this episode, if you got to this point in the show, and you could say one thing to somebody, it might be in business somewhere in the UK, somewhere in Europe, not even in our sector, the entertainment sector, what would you be saying to them about your sort of one golden rule or takeaway from running a business?
I think it's one rule, but involves two things. I would say that the two most valuable resources in the world are your reputation and your time, and really focusing on how to both maximize those, and also being really careful to nurture them, especially the reputation part. That, like, don't discount that. There's the phrase that people say, it's not what you know, it's who you know, in job hunting or whatever, and that is so far beyond true, that having a strong network of people that know you and trust you, and will do anything to help you, and vice versa. There is, in my opinion, nothing more valuable than that in business. Is having a great reputation, and having a large network of people that know that reputation, I think, is invaluable.
Now, we end all the podcast recordings with the same questions for everyone. So they're rapid fire. So, okay, Apple or Android?
Apple. Well, Apple computer, or Apple phones, I mean, and PCs.
X, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I've had to add now because people start saying that as well. What's your platform of choice?
Preferably none of it. If I wasn't on social media for business, I probably would be on none of them. But I am the most active on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Would you prefer a city break or a beach break?
Is mountains a choice?
Mountains can be a choice, yeah.
All right, mountains.
Very good. Live in the town or live in the country. Now you're living in the California, so you've got plenty of space around you in a small holding. So there we go. Probably
Yeah, well, we are in the country. Yeah, so we moved out of the city to go be in a rural area. So we're in a small town. So I'll take that.
First class will save the money.
A little bit of both, but I am a believer in, there's not much you can do with your money when you're dead other than leave it to your kids. So, take care of yourself financially, take care of your family, and enjoy it while you can.
And spend that inheritance.
That's right. When you find that for me, let me know.
Yeah, will do. I'll message you from my desert island. Are you a morning person or a night person?
Well, very much a night person. Very much a night person. I have been forced to mornings by children and dogs, but I would very much be a night person.
Exercise. Is exercise important or is it not important?
It is very important for me. I thrive on, moving and things, but I am not a go to the gym type. I have done that a few times in my life, but I much prefer to play sports and do, fun competitive things than I do to just go throw some weights around. But staying active is a great stress reliever. And of course, staying healthy. I'm fortunate that I'm still relatively on the young side. So I've got some time left, but I don't want to squander that and end up on the other side of that when I'm, in my 60s.
Innovate or improve?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think there are times for both. I think improving things is a little bit of a safer bet typically. Innovate comes with risk, but also has much higher reward. So innovation where appropriate and when you're pretty sure of it. But innovating unsure is a pretty quick path to failure in that avenue, I would think.
Would you challenge the status quo or just let it pass?
I am not one to just let things go if I think they are poor choices.
And I'm standing at the bar. What drink will I be buying you?
Oh, I like to say that I stick to beer and bitch drinks. I'm not a whiskey guy or anything, but I love a frozen margarita or good beers and like sours and wheats. Or my cocktail of choice is a pisco sour, which most people have never even heard of, but it's a Peruvian drink.
I'd have to go and look that up to find out what that is. So. Well, Brad, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us today on the podcast. Lots to take away from that. Lots of lessons and a very, very interesting story. So thank you very much for joining me. And hopefully we'll catch up next time I'm in your side of the woods. So it'll be a pleasure.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate you having me on and appreciate those that have stuck around to listen.
So thank you very much, Brad, for joining us today on the Business Takeaway podcast. Lots of lessons there and really interesting to understand how the business is going and that startup piece and how interesting that is from a new business starting out and experiencing some of the pain points that you don't expect when you're working in a business to what you're experiencing in a startup. Just like to remind you to make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. You can get it on Apple, Spotify and YouTube. And of course, if you're subscribed, please do give us a 5-star rating if you're enjoying the show, and make sure, of course, you're telling your friends. We've got lots more episodes to come, some great guests lined up, and of course, we've got a fantastic back catalogue now of some previous guests, so please do go and listen to those interviews. We're also doing some Saturday podcasts out on YouTube, which will be just some shorts from various of the episodes, so do keep an eye out for those as well. Anyway, it just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed today's show.